I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today. Greetings from Arkansas. I'm not responsible for the tornadoes or the, I guess, earthquakes, but the last question that my 11-year-old daughter asked me last night was, how did the Thunder do? Been listening to the game, and she gave me very strict orders to bring a Thunder souvenir back, so I'll be working on that this afternoon. Ideas have consequences. I speak from personal experience. My maternal grandmother lived through the Russian Revolution and all the horror that brought with it. 3 of her children died. They're buried in the old country. And sometimes I'm asked as an economist why I'm interested in these kinds of ideas like school choice. And my one-sentence response is ideas do matter. And you're all a testament to that. I want to thank you coming from Arkansas, because we have looked to you in Oklahoma for years. You've provided leadership on several issues, tax rates, also school choice. You've been ahead of us in both areas. You adopted school choice, I believe, in 2010. Last year, 2015, we adopted a school choice program for the first time. We were the 25th or tipping point state to adopt school choice. And you're now moving forward in a manner much faster than we'd like to. I have a handout that I brought. It's before you, the green sheet, and I'm going to stick pretty close to that. And then I've left you one other handout. It's blue, that focuses on really what I see as an economist, which is the nub of the issue here. When you talk about raising taxes to fund K-12 public education, that's what the Arkansas Educational Standards Committee that Hillary Clinton headed up did, and that's what the debate, as I understand it, in Oklahoma today is all about. And the claim that was made in Arkansas at the time, and it's still debated today by fewer people, but occasionally it'll come up, is income, or in our case, the lack of income growth that resulted from raising taxes and spending more on public education versus the idea that you were interested in, which is thinking about education as a market, thinking about consumer sovereignty, in other words, expanding choice options for parents, guardians, and students. So I'll give you some brief history. I mentioned 3 Arkansas Gazette articles, and if you're interested in what the Arkansas Educational Standards Committee that Hillary headed up, if you're interested in that in more detail, these would serve as a starting point. The first article describes the actual announcement where Bill Clinton announced Hillary would head up the panel. He made the point that they're a policy team. You can't separate the two. Other observers had made the same point. Most prominently, Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein fame, the former Washington Post reporter, wrote a book about Hillary a few years ago. It's mentioned in the outline. And he made the same point, that their team in terms of policy, and he also made the point that it would have been inconceivable in 1983 for Bill to be elected governor again after losing without Hillary. She's always been a big part of the process, and they're a team. And so this 15-person panel was set up, and they heard testimony. Hillary drew a lot of accolades. She also made some observations that I think you would find interesting. She observed that social promotion of students was unacceptable. She noted that low teacher-student ratios were a good thing. They were important. And that we needed to have accountability and we needed to have standards. Hence the title of the panel that she headed up. Where we would differ with her and her defenders today, and where we do at the Policy Foundation, is her insistence that raising taxes to fund K-12 education leads to economic prosperity or growth, or in this instance, income growth in the long run. If you think about it, there's really 2 ideas at play here. Ideas have consequences. One idea, raise taxes to spend more on K-12. The other idea is allow for more markets in terms of offering educational choices to the consumers, the parents, the guardians, the students. And those two were at conflict in Arkansas, and I think if you think about it, they're actually in conflict here today in Oklahoma. So what did the panel do? It heard testimony, and the recommendation, the major recommendation that came out of the panel was to raise the sales tax by 1 cent and to fund K-12 education. This was done in a special session in 1983. Both Bill and Hillary, in their autobiographies, which are cited in the handout, speak about that. They note some of the policy specifics, if any of you are interested in the nitty-gritty of how that happened. And they also make references, and this is very important, they also make references to income and Arkansas being a capital poor state. They're very explicit about that. So part of the argument that they advanced was an economic argument. If we raise taxes, that sales tax, we're going to have more jobs and more paychecks. I can actually summarize it, jobs and paychecks. It's the jobs and paychecks argument. This policy will result in more jobs and more paychecks. The job side of that equation is debated. The income side, I don't think the other side can really provide any kind of plausible argument when faced with the handout that you have before you, which is chart B, charted blue. So if you take a look at that real quick, this is from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is the source. And what this chart shows is Arkansas's per capita personal income as a percentage of the United States. So if you look at 1984, which is the first year after the reform took place, you'll see we're 76.1% of the U.S. average. You would expect if there was income growth coming from that would rise. And yet if you look through the decade of the 80s and then into the early 90s, it was pretty constant. It really didn't move much at all. And this led the New York Times in 1992 to come in and take a closer look at what was happening in Arkansas. Recall that in 1992, Bill was running for president. And so what the reporter concluded in the article September 23rd, 1992, it is, quote, "It is true that taxes have risen, particularly for the poor and middle class." And that's the reference to the sales tax, including a very regressive grocery tax. I don't believe you tax groceries completely. Do you tax them completely in Oklahoma? Has that been part of the debate here? Is it part of the proposal to raise your sales tax to raise the grocery tax? No. Well, in Arkansas, what the Clintons did is they raised the sales tax on groceries. And it wasn't until another Democratic governor, Mike Beebe, in 2007, if you look at the chart, you'll see 2007 we're 78.3%. And then in 2009, we break 80% for the first time ever. And since then, 5 of the last 6 years, we've been above 80% for the first time ever. He reduced our sales tax on groceries, a policy that we argued for very strenuously at the Policy Foundation. We argued that this would help low-income families, middle-class families. It was a good public policy to pursue. And as you can see, as a result of that, one of the reasons why our income has increased is that people have more money in their pocket to spend on other things. I mentioned the New York Times. So this is what the New York Times did. They came into Arkansas in the fall of '92, and they examined the claims of the proponents and the critics of the Clintons' policies. And one thing that strikes you from this article is that there is a number of excuses that are cited for why Arkansas tends to be 46th, 47th, 48th, or 49th in income rank. And many times, for example, one argument that was advanced, it took Arkansas 150 years to create its economy, so it wouldn't be fair to expect the Clintons to reverse this long-term trend in 1 decade. And we usually say fine. But then you look at the data before you and you have 2 decades. If you look at 2002, early this century, the income as a percent of the US is still low. This has been the fallback argument that the proponents have made, that you just have to wait. It takes a while for this spending more on K-12 to take effect. And really, they're making a mistake in their economic reasoning, and this is a mistake. There are a lot of factors that go into economic development, economic prosperity. They focus in on just one factor. They focus on the skilled workforce. Skilled workforce is a product of a state's education system. But there are many other factors that go into creating jobs and paychecks. Tax rates, regulations, consistently in applying those regulations, infrastructure, the rule of law, freedom of, to control property, contract. There are many factors that go into that. The other side of this argument, they tend to focus on just one idea, which is that it's the skilled workforce. And they argue that the way to improve the skilled workforce is by, in Arkansas's case, raising the sales tax. And this will lead to income growth. I would submit to you that the data does not show that at all. The data shows that the policy that they enacted was a failure, and if it had been a success, you would have seen the income rise more dramatically as it has since 2009 when a different policy was tried. Now, if you look at the handout, so that's the first part of my presentation, the Educational Standards Committee. I've spoken a little bit about part 2, the lack of income growth. The committee's recommendations were proposed as a way to improve not only our K-12 system, but our economy. The arguments were based on a multiplier effect. Spend more on education, and you get this multiplier of more jobs and income. The Clintons were correct to note that we have a very low income rank, but if they were here today, if Bill and Hillary were here, I would tell them that you're wrong in your policy prescription. And that's something that we'll debate with you, that you were wrong to focus on raising the sales tax and to not think about giving consumers more choice, which is in effect what has been happening lately as we follow you. So finally, there were economic factors that finally led to our income growth post-2008. And here's what a few of them are. I mentioned the grocery tax being cut by 75%. Another factor was that our economy became more diversified. We have many public companies in Northwest Arkansas. Many of them are world-renowned companies that you probably are very familiar with. We also had a debate about education that went far beyond any debate we'd had in the past. And that debate came about because our state Supreme Court on 2 occasions found our system of K-12 school finance unconstitutional. The Clintons in 1983 were acting in response to a lawsuit. It's mentioned in the handout. And so the reforms that they put into effect, the policies that they tried, were in response to that lawsuit, which didn't end the drama. There was another lawsuit filed in 1992, Lakeview v. Huckabee. It was filed and then it was refiled when Governor Huckabee was in office. And that issue wasn't decided until earlier this century in 2004. And this is what the legislature did when our Supreme Court found our system of school finance not only, they found it unconstitutional, they came with a new idea, and that's this. We're going to have more accountability, we're going to have more transparency in K-12, we're going to insist on results, and part of that is going to be choice. The choice element was missing in the 1983 debate. In fact, there were people on the other side who were arguing that the private schools needed to be regulated more aggressively. You still find administrators who are older who will talk about that. In 2004, the debate was driven by how can we expand choice in some limited ways in response to this court decision. And the major way they did it was charter schools. Charter schools were non-existent in Arkansas. In 1996, we had two scholars, Allison Tucker and Donna Watson. They did a study for us arguing for charter schools. A Democratic and a Republican legislator went to Texas, toured a charter school, discovered that they were serving at-risk students, came back to Arkansas in 1999, expanded our weak charter law. Today we have nearly 40 charter schools serving over 10,000 students, and those numbers are growing. And much of the demand for charter schools comes from urban areas, comes from parts of the state where the public schools are failing, students who are coming from families that are disadvantaged. And that was part of the debate in 2004 to move this process forward. It wasn't just we're going to raise taxes to fund public education. It was how do we give more choices to consumers. You in Oklahoma, you moved forward quicker than we did thanks to your work. Every one of you in this room who's been involved with the school choice issue has played a role in driving that process. For years, we have looked to you in Arkansas and we've said, here are the states that border us that have school choice. Oklahoma, Louisiana, Mississippi, you're doing more than we are. Here's what you're doing. The Friedman Foundation publishes a wonderful little database on their site that lists all the states and what they're doing. We use that all the time. And so finally, last year, we got a school choice plan limited to the children of active duty military and also children with learning disabilities. And we hope to go forward and broaden that. There are legislators who are interested in pursuing that issue along with constitutional officers. If I could summarize, this really is the problem now for the proponents of raising the sales tax and not having school choice. And the problem in Arkansas is Little Rock School District, which last year was taken over by the state because of academic distress. We had 6 schools that were declared in academic distress, and it was so bad, the student performance, that the state had to come in and take it over. So the proponents of raising the sales tax have several problems. Here's what they are, real quickly. The first problem is that it didn't lead to the income growth that they promised it would. Second of all, in 1983, they were debating accountability. Well, we have a Supreme Court that has found on 2 occasions our system's unconstitutional after the decision. And the State Board of Education and Department of Education are now overseeing various parts of, they're overseeing the Little Rock School District. That debate around Little Rock now is being driven by there's 2 groups, and they're the same 2 groups that I've mentioned throughout this talk. Those who argue for more taxes and more spending, and those who argue for more choice and more options. And what you're seeing is the legislature respond to that debate, I believe, in this past session by passing our first school choice law. And so that's a quick overview of what happened in Arkansas with the Educational Standards Committee, what's happened since. And I think I should stop talking now, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.